Good evening. Today is December 16th, 2020, and I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the District of Sechelt Council and acknowledge that we are coming to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Sechelt Nation. We have an agenda in front of us. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
No, Your Worship.
Thank you.
Minutes that were distributed separately, but it's not an addition actually.
Yes. So I think, do all the councillors have the minutes of the APC? Okay, I'm seeing some nods. So look for a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you very much. We'll move to adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting of Wednesday, December 2nd. Any errors or omissions in these minutes? All right, seeing none, I'd look for a motion to adopt the minutes. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And then I'm going to turn to Director of Planning, Andrew Allen.
Thank you. We have recently received notice from the contractor working on the expansion of West Sechelt Elementary School that they did not pour a foundation late night, either December 4th or December 5th. And this came to light earlier this week, and they are now seeking permission for noise variance for tomorrow night, December 17th into December 18th. And so thank you for your patience while I suggest this new update and recommend approval subject to a revised letter from the school principal to the surrounding property owners and residents. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Council? Councillor Toth.
Thank you. I had actually driven past there at 9:30 at night and noticed that the place was totally quiet that night. So that was my one question from the minutes in terms of business arising. So happy to move that recommendation.
All right, so that council approve a variance to noise bylaw number 519, 2012, allowing construction works between 11 p.m. and 7 p.m. from December 17th to December 18th at West Sechelt Elementary School property. Is there a seconder? Seconded. Any further comments? All those in favor? Thank you. Moving on to receipt of the committee meeting minutes from the Advisory Planning Commission meeting. Somebody to move those, move receipt, moved. And is there a seconder? Seconded. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Thank you. And we'll move on to zoning amendment bylaw number 25-309. This is the rezoning application for 5546 Inlet Avenue for Legion number 140. First motion to receive the report. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And over to staff. Okay, we can see your presentation, but we can't hear you.
There we go. Sorry about that. Great. So tonight I can present to you a rezoning application for 5546 Inlet Avenue. This is for the Royal Canadian Legion branch number 140. This rezoning application is essentially required to facilitate their relocation of their operations from their current location on Wharf Avenue, where they currently have a lease on the property that'll be expiring, I believe, at the end of this year or next year. And to relocate to a new property that they've purchased at 5546 Inlet Avenue. This is the former location of an automotive repair shop. And the specific rezoning is to allow for a neighborhood pub as a site specific permitted use within the commercial 2 zone. Additionally, proposed as part of this development is the addition of 181 square meter addition to the rear of the building. And this is to facilitate the size of the building to be used as a restaurant pub, as well as to facilitate the Legion operations, a meeting room in the back. And now in order to accommodate this, a variance to the parking requirements would be needed. From a land use context, the current OCP designation has this property within our downtown center designation, and there's a wide variety of uses supported, including establishments such as this: retail, commercial, residential, a mix of all uses. So this is an appropriate use in the OCP. And as far as the zoning bylaw, it's zoned commercial 2, which at this particular time doesn't allow for neighborhood pub. In the current zoning bylaw, that's actually under our public assembly zoning. However, we do have a similar zoning that apply to other properties, which is the craft brewery designation in association with a restaurant. So this proposal, just some 3D renderings to visualize sort of the scale of the addition, would be off the rear of the building, and just approximately doubling the size of the building. Not quite. It's about a 40-foot addition off the back. The applicants did explore going up to a second story. However, the costs of doing that and retrofitting the building were prohibitive. This is a floor plan of the proposed addition, essentially with open multi-purpose space and an office space near the back to accommodate the Legion operations as well. So some things to consider with this particular application is there would be a relocation of the liquor primary license that was recently issued to the Legion. A similar process would have to happen again, subject to public notice and council consideration to relocate the liquor license to this new location. And as noted, to accommodate this change of use, well, the addition to the building, it would require a variance to the parking. Currently, the zoning bylaw does have exemptions when there's a change of use in an existing building in the downtown area, meaning that if a building changes use from, let's say, retail to restaurant, there would be no change in parking requirements. Downtown buildings are recognized to be more historical and not necessarily have the sufficient site area to accommodate on-site parking. The current proposal would create 11 parking spaces on site, and that consists of 3 small car spots and 8 standard size spots. This works out to about a rate of about one space per 6 seats. The current proposal calls for 65 seats in the restaurant component, and that's a reduction from the current 1 per 3 required under the current regulation. Now, the staff report just does provide some comparable jurisdictions that have downtown parking standards, and this rate is consistent with those standards. As far as development process, this is the first step. We're currently at first reading. Should first reading be given, we would proceed with referrals, consultation with the Advisory Planning Commission, and further review of the application. That would be followed by second reading, public hearings, third reading. At that point, we'd be looking at development permit, looking at the development variance permit for the parking and any other conditions of adoption, followed by finally fourth reading or adoption. And at that point, we would be looking at the servicing agreement and the building permit that would look at frontage improvements and those types of issues, as well as the liquor license relocation. So we have 2 recommendations today, which is to give first reading to zoning amendment bylaw number 25-309-2020, and that we initiate the referral process. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any questions of Sven? Councillor Toth?
Thank you. Just looking in the report, I'm wondering if there's in terms of the referrals to agencies, I don't see School District 46 in there. And given that they've got a facility right across the street, I'm wondering if it'd be appropriate to refer to them as well.
They would automatically be referred to due to their proximity to the property, but we can ensure that they get an early referral as part of this referral process.
Okay, any other comments or questions? I noticed in the report on page 20, it talks about medium to long term is recommended district undertake a comprehensive parking study for the downtown area. So, I mean, have you guys talked about that inside planning? What kind of time frame are you looking at? If so, I know that parking has always been a conversation for the community, particularly around the downtown area.
Mhm. Certainly, there's Director Allen may want to comment on this as well, but a comprehensive parking strategy that takes account of all the available on-street parking as well as off-street parking, how the regulations are implemented as far as hourly limits. Is there cash in lieu provisions for when there's a reduction like this requested, and more of a long-term outlook to how to manage parking in the downtown area, as well as the adjacent residential areas that might have resident parking. There's a variety of options available to comprehensively manage parking. In Sechelt, it hasn't really been looked at since the early 90s. So it's certainly something that we would be looking forward to doing.
Okay. Maybe Director Allen, did you want to comment on that? I know you've got a lot on your plate.
I certainly agree with what Sven has to offer here, and parking is an issue, particularly during the daytime. If one were to go back after 5 p.m., the premise of parking in the inlet Dolphin Avenue area is much different, but certainly during the day can be quite busy. So we do have to look. We've noted in previous staff reports and presentations that our downtown parking standards are high as compared to other municipalities. And so it is something, it's not specifically on our short-term work plan, but it is most certainly something that can add value towards our consideration of development approvals in downtown.
Mm-hmm.
Your worship, I would add that part of addressing downtown parking issues is promoting more active transportation. So through the engineering department and the capital program we're building here, and with the wharf project in particular, we're promoting more active transportation, and that would be part of the solution to alleviating parking, is not just building more parking lots, but also promoting more people to cycle and walk to the downtown core and use transit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good idea. And I mean, we are seeing a lot more development starting in the downtown. There seems to be a focus on the downtown. So it's good to know that you've got that, on your radar and are looking at dealing with that going forward. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, there are some recommendations on page 17.
Can I just jump in?
Yes.
All right.
McLean, sorry, I didn't see your hand. Go ahead.
There it is. I just want to comment on the works and services part of the report, page 21. It's proposed that the services, particularly the street side improvements, be a cash in lieu contribution rather than immediate contributions. I think we all know the state of Inlet Avenue. It's rough. There's no actual sidewalk to get to this property from Cowie Street. So do we have any sort of timeline on when we could see these improvements? And would development such as this accelerate that timeline?
That's a challenging one because Inlet Avenue is not listed as a DCC project, so it's not on our immediate scope. That said, another larger project we have in mind is a review of projects within the DCC bylaw. It's clear that Inlet Avenue, with its angled-in parking and so forth, could use both a safety and aesthetic upgrade, no question. And there's other opportunities for development on Inlet in a couple of areas that may accelerate overall a development of that road frontage.
I do know as well that one of the owners of property along there has reached out and is requesting a meeting with me in January to to have some preliminary conversations about what their plans are. So some more will come from that as well.
Your worship, in response to Councillor McLean's question, one of the driving features of future capital projects, as we think in terms of more of an asset management type strategy, is having infrastructure renewal as being kind of the driver for these projects. So it would make sense to build out the other infrastructure like the road and the sidewalks and active transportation as the condition of any buried deep utilities is warranted for replacement. So that would be done through a condition assessment of the storm sanitary collection system, because obviously you want to do these projects as one whole suite reconstruction, so that you'd hate to do a bunch of sidewalks and then 5 years down the road you have the condition of your underground infrastructure deteriorating to the case that it warrants replacement also. And so then you're reconstructing sidewalk for a different reason. So as we move in the future, we want to look at how we implement these projects in terms of a broader infrastructure renewal strategy for the district.
Perfect.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just throw in, it might be good to get something like this inlet avenue on a capital works plan, like far out, but just so we have it on our agenda. I don't recall if it's there now, but something like 2026, or just so we could start working towards a set date. But that's a discussion for another time.
All right. Councillor Scott, did I see your hand up? No? Okay. Anybody else?
I was liking what Director Dillon was saying.
Yeah.
It makes total.
Right. Totally. Councillor Toth.
Thank you. I'm just wondering at what point we do require that cash in lieu from, in this case, the Legion. Is that prior to building permits? Is that, can that be pushed out to after completion of the project and they've started generating revenue off of this project?
Yeah, it would form part of the servicing agreement, and that would generally be required prior to issuance of the building permit.
Okay. Any other further questions or comments? Okay, I didn't miss any hands this time. There are some recommendations on page 17. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, I'll move recommendation 2 and 3. So 2, the council give first reading of the zoning amendment bylaw 25-309 2020, and that staff refer the application to the stakeholders, agencies, and the advisory planning commission for comment.
Is there a seconder? Seconded? All those in favor? Thank you. So we'll move on to the bylaw on page 34. So this is District of Sechelt bylaw number 25-309 2020, Legion number 140, being a bylaw to amend District of Sechelt zoning bylaw number 25-1987. And I'd look for someone to move first reading. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Moving on to item 8.2, rezoning application for 5547 Trail Avenue for City State Consulting. This is zoning amendment bylaw number 25-308 2020. Motion to receive the report. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And over to staff.
Thank you. So this application is back before you for consideration of second reading and scheduling of public hearing. Staff have completed the referral process and review of the application. Just to recap, this is a rezoning application to consider 5547 to introduce the allowance of small lot subdivision. Lots down to a minimum of 350 square meters. This would facilitate a specific subdivision on this property, currently the only property with this zone, and it would allow a lot split perpendicular to Trail Avenue, creating a new lot with access off of Starfish Lane and the existing lot off Mermaid maintaining its access at that point. Referrals were undertaken and all comments received are included in the staff report. Further review of the application, staff do propose that the owner be required to pave the entire width of Lamprey Lane adjacent to the property. And this is mostly there's no immediate plans for the district to be paving this portion, the other portion of the of Lamprey Lane. So it would be the time to do that would be now. As far as just a recap of the surrounding land uses, this is within the village residential infill area, which is a fairly detailed land use category that applies to residential lots in the downtown area that have rear lane access. This is an area where a broader variety of housing is supported, including small lot subdivision, duplexes, laneway homes, and a variety of gentle infill development. So this application is in conformance with the OCP policies. Further, should this rezoning application be approved and the subdivision proceed, any new home would be subject to Development Permit Area 8, which is a collection of guidelines that ensures high quality development when it comes to small lot subdivisions to ensure that there's not undue impact to adjacent neighbors, viewscapes, and considerations like that. So our recommendations today are to give second reading to zoning amendment bylaw number 25308, 2020, and that staff be authorized to schedule a public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Councillor Toth.
I got a whole mess of questions and I forwarded them to planning and engineering ahead of time so that there's no surprises here, hopefully. Recognizing that, bylaw 430's got some pretty outdated drawings in it, is the applicant going to be required to install curbing as per drawing A of that SR8 standard? Or do they not have to do curbing?
I think I'll let Director Dillon answer this question.
Okay, and you'll need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, a little brain
Okay.
freeze there on the unmuting.
That's okay.
So all the upgrades must be in accordance with bylaw 430 unless varied via development variance permit. And the lane has not had any upgrades to date, but some other lanes have been paved as part of the capital projects without curbs. There are currently two options for lanes. We do require 7-meter laneways, but they can go with the single grade crossfall with the curbing on one side, or they can do what's called a reverse crown, where they have a centerline swale essentially, and that would not require curbs. So it depends on the option presented by the developer on how they want to do that.
Thank you. And I've got more if nobody
Yeah,
else
go
has their
ahead.
hand up. So,
Yeah, nobody else has got their hand up. Go
all
ahead.
right. Looking at page 39, the drawing that shows the site layout and sanitary and water services to the property. I'm just wondering that if we're looking to encourage more of this type of development going forward, if they should be bringing the water and sewer lines up the laneway instead, so that they can sort of work their way up the laneway as properties develop. So that's just sort of a general question, probably for engineering.
I can take a stab at answering it first, and feel free to jump in, Kern. But one of the issues with bringing water lines down the lane would be the phasing of how that happens. Currently, all the lots have water access from the main street frontage along Mermaid. So if this property was to subdivide, we could realistically only get them to extend the water line a very short way, or the SCRD would. And to bring it all the way down the lane would require some form of either a capital project or an extreme burden on this particular development to extend the water line. And it wouldn't necessarily benefit any of the individual properties, since they do have access to the water line off the main street.
Yeah, I'm going to echo those comments, and I would say, just from an engineering standpoint, that the laneway having fire hydrants there, some of the fire trucks are getting larger, so it does make it difficult for those fire trucks to get into the laneway. So it's not the best, most advisable to have those fire hydrants in the laneway access. And I echo the sentiment that it would result in some extra charges to the developer, and depending on the phasing, that could be a big amount or a smaller amount. But
Okay, and that actually preempted my other question there, because the fire department does say that if we're going to allow for laneway development, that they want to see fire hydrants in the laneway. And I drove up that lane today, and I don't know where you'd put a fire hydrant, because it's like laying right to fences. It's a very narrow lane compared to some that we seem to have developed around here.
Mm-hmm. If I can
Yeah.
clarify.
Okay, yeah.
I'll just jump in and just to clarify the comments from the fire department. I did follow up with them and have more conversations, and the comment that there be fire hydrants in the lanes did come from the understanding that some mid-block properties potentially in the future may apply for subdivision or rezoning and result in a north and south lot split where they would only have access through the laneway, but that wouldn't be the case. Any mid-block subdivision would have to be narrow lots where the primary fire access would still be from the main street with a secondary fire access off the back. So it's not like you have to go across another person's property to get to that building.
Okay, thank you. And I've got one more.
Go ahead.
On our hands.
Mhm.
I believe that our commercial DCCs are based on square footage. Our residential DCCs are flat rate per lot. Is that correct?
That's right.
I'm just wondering if there's any other jurisdictions that have moved to some sort of a scaled DCC program based on the lot size, either as a square footage or as thresholds, because I'm thinking a 500 square meter lot is going to have a much lower implication on drainage than a 20,000 square meter lot, right? So I'm just wondering if it's fair that they pay the same DCCs as a full size property.
That approach is certainly one that's available to local governments to adopt, to have different ways of calculating DCCs for different types of residential development. Director Dillon brought up the case of Vernon that has introduced a square footage and different types of structures that would pay different rates of DCCs. So it's certainly something that could be looked at in the future. Currently, we do have a flat fee for all single family dwellings.
That's all my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I could just add to that too, to answer your worship in response to Councillor Toth's question, is that yes, in Vernon, we do have a threshold of 400 square meters for single detached, what we call small lots, and so and there's also a different rate structure for DCCs depending on whether the property's in the core area of town or the outer area of town. So if you want to use it as I think in the case of Vernon, they were trying to promote some downtown revitalization, so they lowered some DCCs downtown. So, and obviously, as you get farther away from the town into the outer areas, to provide that infrastructure becomes more expensive as well. So it makes sense you'd have a differential there. So, yeah, it's definitely something I saw in Vernon, and I'm sure other municipalities are doing it.
So that would be something to keep in mind when we look at rewriting our DCC bylaw.
I'll just jump in briefly, if I may. The Local Government Act also provides, it's more for dwellings than properties, but provides an exemption for small dwellings under 29 square meters in size. So as you get some of these small lot subdivisions, you might end up potentially with very small dwellings, which could be DCC exempt as well.
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, just for reference, like in the core area of Vernon, for example, it's $13,766 a lot per lot, over 400 square meters, and then under 400 square meters, it's $9,845 per lot, and that's the servicing DCCs. That's exclusive of water and parks and trails and natural space DCCs. So just discussing this, it would definitely be the storm and sanitary that would be a little bit more less expensive, I guess, for the smaller lots, but things like roads and other aspects would be about the same regardless of the lot size.
Okay, any other comments or questions? So there are some recommendations on page 35. How would you like to proceed? Councillor Scott, you unmuted yourself.
Oh. All right, I'll move it. I hadn't remuted myself.
Okay.
But sure, just let me get to the.
So it's that council gives second reading to zoning amendment bylaw number 25-308-2020, and that council authorize staff to schedule a public hearing for zoning amendment bylaw number 25-308-2020.
So moved.
All right, is there a seconder? Seconded? All those in favor? Thank you very much. And I want to say what I've been noticing over the last while from council is sending questions ahead of time to staff so that they can look up answers, make sure they have the information at hand. I mean, it not only has them be prepared, but it lets us move things forward at our council meetings rather than have to wait for responses. So thank you for doing that. It's much appreciated on all sides. So move to the actual bylaw. This is starts on page 50. This is item 8.2B, District of Sechelt bylaw number 25-308-2020 for city state, being a bylaw to amend District of Sechelt zoning bylaw number 25/1987. And we're looking for second reading. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you very much. Moving on to item 8.3A. This is BC Energy Step Code Public Engagement Summary and Implementation. Motion to receive the report. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And Mr. Allen.
Yes, thank you. This is a very brief report that's in front of you this evening. It is a follow-up report to our December 2nd agenda item, whereupon Building Bylaw Amendment 409-7 received the first 3 readings. We recommend adoption tonight, and that will put us in the position to have step code level 1 ready to go beginning of 2021. And we're pleased to take this step and do so in concert with Town of Gibson's and the Sunshine Coast Regional District, and provide an even and timely approach to the building community starting in 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Lamb, and then Councillor McLean.
So this is the BC Energy. This is set up by the BC provincial government, and basically, and we're just trying to conform with what Gibson's and the regional district are doing. And basically, the province is asking everyone to step in line and follow this program. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. They've offered steps and stages to get there, and this is step 1. And step 1 it focuses on the efficiency of houses, has a blower door test component, and so forth. So it's the first step. And other municipalities have done this in the preceding years, and we are trying to ensure that we follow suit with the growing requirements of the code.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Councillor McLean? Councillor McLean?
I know this was asked last time, but I just want to make sure we're all 100% on the same page, because I know I'm going to get the question. For what projects does this apply? So what is the breakdown between step code and not step code in this transition period? So project started, what does the project start? Yeah.
You bet. This would apply to new applications received commencing beginning of 2021. So if somebody has a building permit in now and it's a full application, then they would be operating pursuant to 2020 regulations, even if they don't start till January of next year.
Okay, so building permit issued or before that?
A building permit, a full permit package been received.
Been received, okay.
We may have a few that haven't been reviewed yet if they don't get picked up till first week of January, but they're a full package now as of today or as of next Thursday, then there'll be a 2020 application.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
You're welcome.
Councillor Todd.
Thank you. I've expressed reservations about this in the past, costs, availability of the energy advisors. I know that BC is making these changes mandatory eventually, so it's not a matter of if we can adopt them, but sort of how early we get on board. I am pleased to hear that we do have local companies that are already looking at getting certified energy advisors on staff on the coast. So that's really proactive of them rather than having to rely on off-coast contractors for this stuff. So I'm willing to move recommendation 2 that council adopt building amendment bylaw 409-7 2020.
Is there a seconder? Seconded. Councillor Lamb, you have some questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have a question, but I just have comments. And and once again, you know, affordable housing seems to be a big buzzword, and I think affordable housing, I don't even think that should be a word anymore. I'm just looking at this, and just for my instance, like I have you know, we're in the process of putting up an industrial building, and we haven't got our permits in or anything yet, but so we just went and we had to revise how we're going to insulate this building. It's a 10% increase to the cost of the building, 10%. And so, you know, like, so it's not chicken feed here that we're talking, and this is just the first step of it. And you know, I'm just kind of, you know, there's got to be some other way of looking at how we do housing, because it just keeps getting more money. You know, everything just keeps costing more money, you know, and yeah, so that's just my comment. I mean, I'm going to vote for this because no matter what, the government's got a gun to our head, and it will come into play, and we might as well get on the bandwagon. But somehow we have to be looking at how we can cut costs, because it's not affordable. Housing is not affordable. That's my comment. Carry on, Councillor Todd.
Yeah, I appreciate Councillor Lamb's comments there. I think we have many problems that we can address, and this is addressing climate change. Buildings are a major source of CO2 emissions, heating buildings. So this is about making buildings more efficient. And I think it's one of the most wasteful uses of electricity, heat, natural gas. You heat these buildings, it just leaks outside. All we're doing is plugging the holes in the house. And not all houses, just houses built moving forward. And that's just, it makes a lot of sense. It's something that's within our control that we can do to help fight climate change. So I'm in 100% support.
All right, any other questions or comments? So we have a recommendation on the floor that we adopt building amendment bylaw number 409-7, 2020. All those in favor? Thank you. We'll move to the actual bylaw. Item 8.3B on page 54. District of Sechelt building amendment bylaw number 409-7, 2020. A bylaw to amend building bylaw number 409, 2003. And I'd like to have someone move adoption. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Thank you very much. We have no new business. We are going to move on to item 10.1. This is from the Director of Financial Services, COVID-19 Safe Restart Grants for Local Governments. Motion to receive the report. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And Mr. Douglas.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is the first of probably a few reports on spending $2.563 million that we received from a provincial federal COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant. As we move forward, more and more information comes out about the items that we can spend money on. There are currently 6 areas that we can spend the funds on. 7 areas. And so far for 2020, we've identified 2 streams that we would like to use some of the funding on. $34,100 to cover anticipated reduction in revenues from 2020, and an additional $47,500 to upgrade information technology. We will be having future reports, and they could be under the same streams, or they could be under one of the other headings that are allowed to be spent on. So within the report, there's a small list of the items that we're looking for coverage for now. And like I said, there will be, we've also got a list of items that we're considering and we're doing more research on. But a total of $81,600 for now, and we will come back to council.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions? Questions or comments? Councillor Scott.
So when you speak to revenue shortfalls, what happens with this money? It comes out of the COVID fund and gets driven into general revenue?
Yeah, for the revenue shortfalls gets put into general revenue, yes.
Now, it'll lead into the quarterly report. Are we budget short right now, or would it be worthwhile to use that money to towards something else if we're not short on the budget?
Yeah, I would say right now we're probably not short on the budget, but certainly these revenues are down in this area significantly.
Mm-hmm. So would it be something that we would just allocate those funds to some of the budget requests for the next year on the upgrades for those facilities?
Potentially, yes. But specifically, like if we're going to do some upgrades, the grant itself may be able to fund some of those upgrades, or if this funding goes into surplus, or we can fund it from there as well.
I think one of the criteria that we're aware of and that we're still getting clarification on is what can the funds be used for? We do know that they have to be somehow related to COVID-19 and impacts on the municipality. But if you look at the report on bottom page 56 and top of page 57, that's pretty much all the information we have at this point. So what fits and what doesn't?
And
I don't really know.
I think what I'm getting at is if we're not showing an operational deficit with these facilities, that we need money to fund that deficit, to pull it as a revenue shortfall and pull it into general revenue doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So,
well, these facilities are showing a deficit from what was budgeted, yes.
Maybe from what was budgeted in revenue, but how does that relate to the operational deficit of keeping them going?
Well, even if we had full revenues, they'd be operating at a deficit. And so, it kind of allows us to take some money from a grant and potentially use it and bring it back in a different manner, right? To either a building or for some other aspect. But really you're just covering your revenue shortfall, and it goes into the general revenues at this point, or revenues for these facilities.
Okay, it just might be a little bit more palatable to say it's towards the general maintenance or upgrades or whatever, rather than something that potentially could be viewed as
the
abyss.
And I hear that, but the qualification here is shortage of revenues.
Yeah.
So, the motion and the information we have to provide is based on shortage of revenues for these facilities.
Sounds good.
Sir McLean, did you have questions? Councillor.
I think Councillor Rowe wants to go.
Okay, Councillor Rowe, go ahead.
I'm just going to throw a wild and crazy thought out there. I would like to see, not right this second, but putting it out there that we look at really how we can support those most vulnerable in our community, which I see as one of the options. And, I'm not sure exactly what that looks like. Is there any opportunity to somehow utilize any of these funds to buy some land for affordable housing? Might not be an answer that you even know at this point, but I would like to start a conversation around us looking at how we're able to, acquire some land, start a land trust, or really, it's out, the opportunities are out there for us if we had some land available to us. So I think we need to seriously look at how we can make that happen. And I don't know if this is an opportunity or not. Just wondering what your thoughts were, Mr. Douglas.
I don't know the full answer to that. Indications are that the funds, they want it used for operational impacts primarily. And although the grant money can be used for some limited capital projects, which would include upgrades to a computer system or network, it hasn't really opened the door for that kind of a purchase.
Okay. Some other things on this other eligible items list. There's a couple of things that the tourism grant is referenced in, like the storm watch cameras, just because that's what my eye lands on. And not included in the tourism grant due to cost limits. In other words, they were more expensive than what the transportation grant allowed, or?
Yeah, the grant for the tourism had $1 million cap on it. And so
right, okay.
We had a list to council, and we had the priority order, and we got to priority 3, I think, and we were at $1 million. So okay. The ones that are listed here didn't make it onto that list.
Okay, that's all I have for now. But the land conversation will keep coming out of my mouth.
Okay, no, good point. And our acting chief administrative officer tonight can add that to his list and keep his eye out for, you know, what this can be used for if it actually would fit. Anybody else? Questions? Councillor McLean, and then Councillor Kuster.
Yeah, I think Seashell's in a very unique circumstance here. The fact that some of the largest impacts from COVID were on transit and recreation, both services that we don't operate. So there's definitely that imbalance on the Sunshine Coast, where the regional district provides a lot of these functions, but municipalities got a lot more of the funding. So it's kind of interesting. I think we've identified this list is perfect. I'm in full support of the $81,000 that have been proposed so far. That's the kind of stuff that this is meant for. The challenge comes obviously after, what do we do with the other 97% of this grant and these funds? I like Councillor Rowe's idea because we start taking care of ourselves, the District of Sechelt, the corporation. We cover our revenue shortfalls. Then we need to look at how we take care of our citizens in regards to their impacts from COVID. And I think it's quite easy to argue that homeless, underhoused people are some of the largest impact with it in COVID. So I look forward to the ongoing discussion here.
All right, Councillor Kuster.
Yeah, I just had a question regarding, I mean, I totally support the list that's proposed in the top for the 81.6 as well. It all makes sense. Some of the other items that we're looking at, like phone system upgrades and information technology enhancements, all make sense. But how do you guys, or how do you come up with like improved driveway and parking at Mission House? Like, how is that related to COVID relief? I'm just wondering what the thought process behind that is, and some of the other ones. Maybe I'm missing something, but it didn't make sense to me when I was reading a couple of those ones towards the bottom with respect to COVID relief. I feel like the money could be spent in other places a lot, like looking at what Brenda was talking about and supporting our homeless and our most vulnerable as well. So thank you.
All right, who would like to address that question?
I can speak to the driveway and parking at Mission House. The reason that one is on there is because more and more of our events, gatherings, meetings are taking place in larger venues. That's a venue that's underutilized because people who have mobility issues can't get to it. they have to park across the highway. And so as we eventually want to develop that park into something a little bit more beautiful and continue the walkway along Davis Bay, it kind of fits with our future development plans, but it also fits within COVID so that we can allow more of our citizens to use that facility for, you know, their ukulele lessons and meetings and all of the things that they like to use that for, and also get better access to the park just by being able to pull their cars in and get closer to the building.
Okay. Councillor Toth.
Thank you. Totally, the 81,600 makes total sense. No questions there. I got a few comments around the other eligible ideas and also a couple more ideas to add to this list of things to have a look at. The mobile hand washing station, I recommend also looking at bottle filling. The city of Richmond has a couple of these units that they actually rent out to their local events. And so that reduces our plastics, and they hook to a fire hydrant. They're super simple to use. Anybody can run them. The improved Wi-Fi and electrical for the farmers market. Last year, we voted to discontinue Wi-Fi on Cowrie Street. And, you know, when the farmers market moved into this location in the first place, part of that was doing a big electrical upgrade there. So I'm not exactly sure what they need, because that was, you know, part of that work having been done was part of the reason for keeping them at that location instead of moving them somewhere else. In terms of a couple other ideas, I'd like to see if we can do 1 or 2 additional contract bylaw officers for a period of 1 or 2 years to help with looking at provincial health order enforcement, business checks, things like that, things that we know we need the support on, but that just, it's hard to find the money for more bylaw officers. Well, maybe we can try a couple of contract positions. I'm wondering if we can take advantage of some of this money to hire consultants to help with some of the planning and engineering bottlenecks that we've got, I guess I should say. I'm thinking, you know, subdivision control bylaw, OCP update, liquid waste management plan. Those are things that, you know, when COVID hit and our staff stopped working in the office, it became a lot harder to collaborate on a lot of projects. And I'm wondering if some consultants could help to bring those back into focus and get them out the door. And then one more that's just come up sort of while we were talking here in my head. Are we able to look at possible retrofit grant programs for low income individuals in our community, whether it's energy efficiency or accessibility, what have you? I see that falling within the services for vulnerable persons, but I'll just throw that out there as a question / idea that I haven't given a whole lot of thought to, but yeah.
Okay, I've noted down all the items you said there. So I don't have the answers on everything there yet, but if we're going to push any money out to local groups, they have to be nonprofit. They cannot be for-profit organizations or groups.
Councillor Todd. Okay. I do know that another conversation that will be had at the regional district, it has come up sort of offline at this point, is the regional district is going to be looking at the costs that they've incurred. Chair Lori Pratt, I think she was on the meeting here earlier. I don't think she's there anymore. But she did actually bring it up on Friday when we had a call with Minister Josie Osborne. And just as, you know, Dave is saying, you know, some of these things are still up in the air. We don't know. On that call, it was a call with 1/5 of the mayors and chairs. So basically our region, Lower Mainland, etc. And a lot of the mayors and chairs were asking the same questions. What can we use this money for? What fits in these categories? We need more information. So it was requested that more information come out, because, you know, as you see on the report, that's it. That's all we've got. We know it has to be sort of related to COVID, but we don't know. And we have to report to them. And our concern is, if we think it might fit, we spend the money on that, but then they look at it and say, no, sorry, this doesn't fit. We have to take it out of the rest of our budget somewhere. So that information is still in flux. So there's a whole list here. We don't know if it fits or not at this point. Councillor Toth.
Yeah, actually, I had a question that came up just in thinking about the regional district, and we have a copy of the letter outlining how much money the regional district got, what have you. That letter specified that the money needed to be fully allocated in 2021, even if it wasn't all being spent that year, spent in that year. And I'm just wondering if that came to the district of Sechelt as well. Like, do we need to try and allocate $2.5 million within 2021? Or do we just not know that yet?
Mr. Douglas?
The organization that I belong to, Government Financial Officers Association, they've had 20 questions answered by somebody at the province. And they're saying that we don't have to have the money spent. It didn't divide between decision and spend, but they're saying that into 2022, we would still be able to access our own funds up to that point. So they haven't maybe asked the question the way you've put it, but if I get the opportunity, I will ask that question. But first indication is we kind of have 2.5 years to just push it out, to spend the money.
Yeah, I have a copy of the letter that the district of Sechelt got, and it does not say anything in there. It basically says you can carry over the funds from year to year, so long as at the end of the year, you report what you spent it on in the previous year and what you have remaining. It doesn't even say in there, it has to be spent by 2022. So I'll go back to the one for the regional district, because I know I've seen that as well, and get some clarity on that.
The regional district one's in our agenda for tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McLean.
Yeah, so this is a lot of money, and I think it's exciting that we have the money. We're coming up with all these ideas, which is good. However, at the end of the day, I think we need to recognize that this is taxpayer money. It may not be the district of Sechelt's money, but it is coming from us indirectly through the federal and provincial governments. So I want to make sure that we are, when we do spend these funds, it's still on core governmental needs and governmental services that we expect to provide. So my ideal case is we look at some of our infrastructure gaps, but then that's not related to COVID. But that's my kind of thinking, is we have a lot of stuff we need to spend money on. Let's not go and get the wish list out. Let's get our core list out, so we can use some of these funds to provide the basic services of government, and the stuff that our citizens expect us to provide. So I look forward to future discussions.
Right. I think something else we need to keep in mind is we know that we will have impacts of this into 2021 and maybe into 2022. We don't know at this point yet. You know, just as initially when this hit, we thought, oh, this is short term and we're going to be back to, you know, normal. Well, that didn't come to pass. And we don't know what 2021 is going to look like. So we got some other decisions to make over the next while. All right, any other questions or comments? All right, so there's a recommendation on page 56. Councillor Toth.
I will move recommendation 2. The council approves spending approximately $81,600 of the COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant for 2020.
And just a clarification, Mr. Douglas, do you need us to indicate that it's for the list identified in here, or is that just assumed?
I think it's assumed. It's in the report. It will only be spent on that list, and when it's reported to the province, it'll be shown as the list.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So that motion's on the floor. Is there a seconder? Seconded. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? Thank you. All right, item 10.2. This is 2020 third quarter financial operating report from the Manager of Financial Services. A motion to receive the report. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And is this Beverly or David?
Yes.
Beverly?
Yes, I'll
Okay.
be presenting it. I'm
Perfect.
going to share my screen.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'll share the right one. There we go. That's better. So the purpose of this report is to provide council with an update of the District of Sechelt financial activity for the period of January 1st to September 30th, and to compare the activity with the 2020 financial plan and the comparable period in 2019. The information provided in the quarterly budget variance report is a comparison of the budget amounts to actual revenues and expenses for operations, for operating departments. In addition, included in the package is reporting on capital projects as at the end of the third quarter of 2020. At the end of the third quarter 2020, operating revenue were at 97% and expenditures were at 64% of the annual budget. This compares to 103% and 72% respectively for 2019 in the same period. Though slightly behind, we expect to be complete on budget by year end. The property tax statistic shows on this slide here, shows the number of folios per property class that makes up the property tax base for the District of Sechelt. The majority being 93% residential, 5% business, and then the final 3% is the rest of the 7 categories. Though the number of residential folios equate to 93% of the total, only 85% of total taxes collected is residential, and this is due to the multipliers on classes other than residential. In 2020, the residential folios increased by 53, while all other categories combined had a net increase of 2. Total folios by class is 6,345, while total folios for the district is only 6,158. And the difference is due to several properties have dual classes. Overall outstanding taxes for 2020 has increased by 32% when compared to 2019, with the majority change due to the current year's taxes. Delinquent taxes saw an increase of 67% due to the deferral of the 2020 annual tax sale. The current outstanding above is comprised of 2020 unpaid taxes. Arrears is the 2019 unpaid taxes, and delinquent is all 2018 and older taxes. Of the total current outstanding taxes, 80% is residential, 15% is business, and the remaining is all the other classes. Expenditures are tracking favorably against the 2020 budget, and at the end of the third quarter for 2020, the district has spent 64% of the operating budget expenditures. Expenses are lower this year, largely due to the impact of COVID, the inability to travel, and in addition to some timing of invoicing to the RCMP. Their contracts are billed quarterly, which we bill October, and then we receive funding in November. So there's a little variance there. Salaries and benefits are on track to finish at the end of the year on budget. Salary and benefit expenses are currently at 67% of the 2020 budget. Salary variance is due primarily to the timing of hiring vacant positions. Further notes of the department expenses provided with the quarterly budget variance in attachment 1, which is included in this package. This table shows expenses compared to budget by government functions, and these results are similar to what we had in the same period in 2019. In regards to actual capital project expenditures compared to total budget for the year, a significant amount of project costs are expected the last quarter of this year, and detailed information on capital projects can be found in the package in attachment 2. The recommendation that the report from the manager of financial services regarding the District of Sechelt's third quarter financial report be received. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, council, questions? Councillor Toth.
Thank you, Beverly, for preempting my question. On page 61 in the outstanding taxes as of September 30th, I actually had a notation to ask how that just over $1 million in current outstanding broke down. So thank you for that. You may not have the information at hand or at all because of when you joined the district, but I'm just wondering how that compares with the breakdown of the previous year. If we know, for example, if 15% of 2019's outstanding was also business-ish.
Actually, for 2019, it was 8%. So it has increased. And I did want to add to, as of today, the current amount is around 770,000. So it has dropped. So there has been, we have received some taxes since this report was generated for September 30th.
So given that we have higher arrears or higher unpaid taxes, I know we have a staff member who's phenomenal at working with people to deal with that situation. Is she already working with those who aren't paid up, who potentially are delinquent, who are in arrears, where next year could be an issue for them?
During this part of the tax collection, it's more making them aware that they are what their status is. As we get into, let's say, the spring and summer, that's when we'll really start to work with the people and get, talk to them and, let them know what the next steps are with delinquent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Any other questions? Thank you. I had a question in the actual, so if we go down into the, there's the breakdown by function area kind of thing, right? There's the breakdown in there. Any questions? How many counselors on any of those? It's in attachment 1. Okay, don't see any there. How about attachment 2? This is our capital projects. Councillor Toth.
Thank you. On page 75, squint at it real carefully here. One of the items referenced is the bike lane project and the Bike BC grant for up in the West Porpoise Bay area. I know that we had to previously ask for an extension on that project due to timings and just getting underway with that project. I'm just wondering if we needed to ask for another extension or if they were automatically extended because of COVID circumstances. I don't know if anybody's got an answer to that.
I'm sorry, I don't know, but I know that's an active project. We're working on that one daily.
I just seem to remember that in the original grant, the money had to, basically the project had to be finished by a certain date, and we had to ask for an extension due to extenuating circumstances. So I just was wondering if that extension covered off this period or if we're going to have to ask for another one again, or yeah.
Okay.
I will look that up and try and give you an answer.
Okay. Any other questions?
Your worship, in response to Councillor Toth's question on that, the update I can provide, is this the Reef Road bike lane that you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the current status of that is that we've completed conceptual planning for the project and about 100% of preliminary design. And we're just waiting on some approvals of funding to move ahead with some permitting work. So we're in progress. It's just subject to certain checkpoints and in permitting to move forward.
Okay. Any other questions on any of the capital projects? All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for the detail. Moving on, item 10.3. This is the alternative approval process loan authorization bylaw number 594/2020 for the Public Works and Parks Operations Center. I'd look for a motion to receive the report. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And over to Joanne.
Thank you, Your Worship. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider adopting resolutions required in order to proceed with the alternative approval process for loan authorization bylaw number 594 for the Public Works and Parks Operations Center. By way of background, at its August 5th regular meeting, Council passed a resolution authorizing the district to undertake an alternative approval process to facilitate borrowing of up to $3 million to be repaid over a period not to exceed 25 years in order to finance the cost of constructing a Public Works and Parks Department Operations Center. The loan, under that direction, the loan authorization bylaw was prepared and brought forward to Council in September with a repayment period of 20 years, and Council gave 3 readings to the bylaw at that time. It was then forwarded to the Inspector of Municipalities for review as required, and the district has subsequently received that statutory approval. So the district is now in a position where we can proceed with the alternative approval process, but there are 3 specific items that Council must statutorily approve before, as part of the next steps. And I've set them out here in my staff report. In essence, the first one is make a fair determination of the total number of qualified electors under the AAP. So under the AAP process, in order for the loan authorization bylaw to proceed, there must be less than 10% of qualified electors stating their opposition to proceeding without going to a referendum. So in order to define what that 10% threshold is, Council must make a fair determination of the number of qualified electors in Sechelt. And staff suggest that the fair determination can be accomplished by adding together the number of electors on the 2018 Sechelt Municipal Election Voters List, the non-resident voters list, and combined with the registrations that we received during the 2018 election. And that figure is 8,603. The second area that Council is required to pass a resolution on is establishing the deadline for receipt of the electoral responses. And as I note in my report there, I've offered a timeline that leads to my recommendation that that deadline be February 26, 2021. The third area is Council must establish the elector response form. Set out what the form has to look like, what form we use for the AAP process. A copy of it has been attached to this report for Council's consideration of approval. And I note that during the AAP period, that form will be available to be emailed to any elector requesting a copy. We will have copies on the district's webpage. We'll have them available at the municipal hall to pick up, or we'll have them set up on a table down in the lobby area outside of the Sechelt Library, all during business hours. And the recommendations offered in this report set out, as set out there in my report, the recommendations reflect that. And that's my report. If you have any questions, I'd be pleased to answer them. Thank you.
All right, Council, any questions? Councillor Toth?
Feel bad going first all the time, but
That's okay.
I don't see anybody put their hand up, so there we go. Just a real quick question. You know, looking at the elector response form, it does say that it on here to be valid, it must be fully completed and received by the corporate officer no later than 4 p.m. on that date. So that's not postmarked. That's received at Municipal Hall. They can be faxed or emailed in, which is great for people that don't want to come into the office. They can be postmarked. It doesn't identify that they can be left in the drop box downstairs. So I'm wondering, is that a valid way for people to return forms?
Yes, it is. That would sort of go under mailing, which the elector response form, it does include our physical street address as well as our mailing address. And staff certainly will be checking that mailbox, after 4 p.m., but to make sure we've got all of the forms that were received there. Actually, I should say it'll be checked at 4 p.m. because technically we can't receive forms after that. The forms will all be date stamped. So, by probably our front counter staff. So when it says it must be received by the corporate officer, obviously, if I receive one and it has a date stamp and a time stamp of that time, then that will be sufficient.
Okay, thank you.
So Councillor Toth, are you suggesting that the form may be modified to include something like completed forms may be put in the district mail slot or faxed or emailed to the district?
Well, I mean, if the corporate officer is open to it, I think it would be worth adding on completed forms may be faxed or emailed to the district or dropped off in person at our front counter or the mail slot downstairs.
I can certainly add that. And also to note, this is the official form. We will also provide, a 1 or 2 page information sheet that's going to go into more detail on a lot of this. You want to just kind of fit the most important information on the elector response form. And so we can certainly, and through extra social media, we can highlight those items as we do the information piece. But yes, we can certainly add that to the form as well.
Okay. I have a question about communication to the community. I know that there are statutory notices that have to happen and they have to be in a certain form, so that to meet the legal requirements. But what else are we doing to let the community know what we're doing this for, right? To give them the background, tell them we have people who've been working in trailers for 5 years or 6 years or whatever it is now. And we want to put them in a facility that actually is conducive to them doing the job that they're here to do. Who wants to speak to that?
I can say that, oh, well, great. I was going to say that Julie, we're working right now on the information piece. First statutory notice, if council approves the timeline that I've set out there, the first statutory notice will go in the January 15th, 2021 newspapers. So our timelines, and we're working on it now, is to complete the information piece so that happens in conjunction with the statutory notices. And that said, I'm sure Ms. Rogers can add to that.
Thank you.
Ms. Frank takes care of the statutory notice part, which I think most of us know that when you see a statutory notice in the newspaper, it sounds very legalese. And most people just skim them and don't quite understand them. So we will, at the same time or slightly before those notices are posted, we will be putting information on our website that is essentially what it is we're trying to do, why it's important, and how you can have your voice heard if you are in opposition, because again, they only have to do something if they oppose the project. So we will have information about the project and why it's important on the website. There will be a link to that page from a large button on the homepage so that you don't have to search for it. We will also create a custom URL so that we can put that URL in newsprint advertising on social media, so it's easy for people to find. And we will be using social media to direct people to that page so that they get the information that they need.
Okay, we'll be using like just the newspaper and stuff too?
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right.
Yes, I think the plan, Your Worship, I think our plan in our conversation was to try to have it be in the paper at the same time. So my boring statutory will be beside, as possible, hopefully on the same page, we can put the information together so that both would be in the same newspapers.
Okay, well, that sounds good. Yeah, we want people to understand what we're doing, so that, we've seen in the past where an AAP comes out and perhaps not enough information. And so people are getting inaccurate information and are responding based on that inaccurate information they have. So we want to make sure we give them the actual, what we're doing. All right. Any other questions or comments? Councillor McLean.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just wondering when we will be starting to receive these response forms. Could somebody theoretically submit it tomorrow, or whatever? What are expected deadlines on that?
Yes. The alternative approval process is a quasi-election process. And while it doesn't follow all the same procedures as a regular election or referendum would follow, the whole point of it is to try to do a condensed process that gives council an idea, or, you know, that looks at what the 10% threshold vote. But that said, it's a very clear timeline, and the alternative approval process period starts once the statutory ad goes in the newspaper, and that ad will say that electors' response forms may be received from this date to this date. And then the deadline is the February 26th deadline that's in the paper, that's in my report and will be communicated. So no, people could not present a form now because we're not ready. And as we've said, we want to have the information piece completely ready. So the period starts after the second statutory notice is placed in the newspaper. And that's where the 30-day count starts from there on.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Toth.
More a comment than anything. You know, we've all heard in the past various forms of AAP is not a fair way of doing a borrowing process, things like that. You know, ultimately, this is a mechanism granted to local government by the province. If people don't like this, they should take it up with the province to change the regulations. But I'm sure staff will be getting that question or complaint coming through to people. You know, this isn't a public opinion survey. We're not trying to find out if we should build a swimming pool or a tennis court. You know, this is legal obligations for a safe and adequate workspace for our parks and public works guys. And yeah, so this is not an optional thing for us to go forward with this borrowing. So I personally feel the AAP is perfectly fine in this case, and happy to move the recommendations.
All right, is there a seconder for the recommendations? Seconded. All right, any other comments or questions? All those in favor? Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
All right. So we're moving on to reports from councillors. So I think I had Councillor Rogo first last time. I'm going to start at the bottom this time. Councillor McLean, then Councillor Scott, Councillor Toth, Councillor Lamb, Kuster, and then Rowe. So Councillor McLean, you're up.
All right, so last week was a jam-packed week of public hearings and planning processes. I don't really have too much to bring to this group, but definitely attended a couple meetings last week. Other things I got going on, just Voice Lab has anecdotally noticed that we are losing young people, which it's not a new story, and we're finding a lot of the factors are cost of living. So that's housing, not price of housing, rent, food. It's not really matching up with the pay that people are receiving. So that's just something that we're going to be keeping our eyes on, and we may do a little bit of public promotion around that fact. The Ferry Advisory Committee is emailing like mad. I think I brought it up about a month ago that BC Ferries may be looking at increasing the amount of reservations. We'll know for sure tomorrow, but we're still under that assumption that BC Ferries intends to increase the amount of reservations. So I'll definitely be chatting with council once we have a more definitive answer and figuring out what we can do as council. And that's all I got.
Before I move on to Councillor Scott, I have a question about the Ferry Advisory Committee, or the BC Ferries actually, and you may know some of this information. They did receive funding from the federal and provincial governments for restart funds. Given how much they were losing, I forget what those numbers look like. Is what they were given anything compared to what they were losing? Because that had impacts on long-term capital investments, what they were doing.
I don't have that information offhand.
Okay.
I should note that the Ferry Advisory Committee hasn't formally met all year.
Okay.
Normally we meet twice a year,
Mhm.
and we haven't met in the entire period of COVID. So we've had lots of informal discussions, but opportunities to ask questions like that haven't been presented.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, no, like Councilor McLean said, lots of public hearings last week to sit through. Last night we had a airport committee meeting. The group was just reviewing all the brainstorming. I compiled all the notes from the previous meeting as far as the mission vision statement. So the go forward will be, I have to build a presentation for council, and I will likely be looking to present that the last council meeting in January.
All right. Thumbs up. All right. Councillor Toth.
Thank you. Yeah, I attended the public information and public hearing meetings. I also made it to that airport meeting last night, which was my first one that I've made it to. Unfortunately, I did have to spend a bunch of it helping a member of the public get connected to that meeting due to technology issues, but I had some suggestions for staff to incorporate those changes to make it a little more friendly to people looking at the order papers going forward. So other than that, I don't really have anything to report. I mean, you were all at most of the stuff that I was at.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb.
Yes, I attended the Mosquito meeting. It was their annual general meeting, and I missed the first part of it, but I was there. They brought on 2 new members of the board, John Sutherland and Michelle Crandlemere. And then John Sutherland has stepped up to be the treasurer, and Celia Robin is going to stay on as the chair. Mosquito is working with the Sunshine Coast Credit Union. They're offering a $50 gift certificate, and you pay $40 for it. There's only one per household, I think it is, or one per email address, but it's $50 shop local gift certificate, and you pay $40 for it. So it's a pretty good deal. And also they said the BC wage subsidy is going to be available. It'll be different from the federal wage subsidy. So it's something for people to look into. And then just a little thing that I picked up off the radio the other day, CBC. So it was about a little carbon footprint thing. Shopping local is the best way that you can improve, the least of the effect you can have on the car, your smallest footprint. And so the number one way is having a store delivered to your premises. Number 2 is to walk, and then number 3 is to drive. But they said, and this is a study that's been done by a university in Canada, and they said that shopping through one of the bigger online outlets is at least 50% more impact on the environment. So maybe we could trade some of our whatever it was here. Anyways, that's all. That's my comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Kuster.
Better turn that off.
Okay, I basically don't have much to add. I pretty that everyone else said. I was at the zoning, public hearings, review of the zoning bylaw, and yeah, I just wanted to say that I was actually really impressed with the presentation at the zoning bylaw, and just the comments and questions from the members of the community and the turnout. It was great, and I appreciated their comments, and and what they had to say. It made let me see some other perspectives that I may not have considered. So I appreciated that. And I don't really have anything else to add, actually, other than if I don't see everyone, Merry Christmas.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Rowe.
Yeah, I echo Janice's comments on all the meetings last week. I thought staff did an awesome job. So thank you for that. And it was, the turnout was awesome. And I think there's a lot of value into the planning one. I got a lot of information out of that. As far as what I've been up to, besides the JOB, I finished the housing conference, I think that's since the last time we met. It was pretty good, but it was really targeted this year more at operators. There wasn't a whole lot that was relative to municipal government. And I think, you know, that's probably just a sign of trying to pull something together in COVID. They used an awesome platform. It was way better than UBCM. So that part was good. But my one takeaway, the one municipal session that really sort of related to us, the message that they put out as far as, you know, how to think about it as a municipality is, or even a community, you should be aiming for a community that can house the people who look after the most vulnerable people in your community. So when I thought about that, I thought about community health workers that look after seniors and early childhood educators that look after children. And I know a community health worker barely makes above even what our living wage is in Sechelt. And I'm not sure where ECEs are on, but I think they're probably right around it. So I think that's a real challenge right from the get-go for us. But I thought it was a really interesting lens to look at the whole topic through. Yesterday, I sat in on a very robust meeting with the Poverty Reduction Advisory Group and some guests. And they're doing some great work. The people that are Betty Baxter and Pat Findell, they've done about 40 interviews with both service providers and people with lived experience with poverty. And really, it's going to be, I mean, the outcome is really going to be no surprise as to what the, you know, the most common threads are. And that is housing, 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 and childcare. So Matt Thompson was on, was part of the meeting yesterday, and he talked about shortly coming forward with recommendations for tying up the loose ends on the housing report. So I'm looking forward to that. Anyways, it's a very interactive and dynamic group. So I am looking forward to next steps. And that's about it. And as well, everyone have a great holiday out there that I won't see again until after Christmas.
Thank you. Follow up to your comment about the poverty reduction action report or, you know, plan thing you're putting together. I did notice in the last few days, my question around that was when this funding was announced initially, there was put together a plan and then there would be grants for, you know, applying, you know, to do some of the actions around that. Mm-hmm. There was a notice that came out just in the last few days indicating that that is still in process, mm-hmm. that once the report is done, there is still funding for doing some of the actions. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of watching for that. I didn't know if that would still survive through the election. So it was good to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right. So a couple of things. I had a conversation with the director at Capilano University, again, around the daycare, the ECE training. I have had a few conversations with them, you know, recognizing that the school district and not, you know, even the current operators don't have sufficient staff. We're looking at how can we actually ensure that we get staff trained up to work in these facilities, because it's a big need in the community. So she was going to go off to the dean of the department again, because we have had conversations with him as well, to find out what the plans were to get some of that in place, so we can ensure that people who live here, who need jobs, can get the training to fill these positions that are required. So we're working on that piece. I spoke at the District of Sechelt Chamber of Commerce on Monday of last week. Just gave an up-to-date view on what's happening in the district here. Got written up in the paper. I haven't read that, but others have gotten good feedback about that. I think what I was trying to get out in information was, our staff are busy. We have lots of things going on here in the district, both on the development side, on the capital, project side. There's lots of stuff happening. They're not just sitting around doing nothing. And these work plans that we have in place, even though they might be working from home, they are working flat out. And we can see it in the projects and things that are moving forward. So it's really good. I had a Sunshine Coast Homelessness Advisory Committee meeting sometime in the last couple of weeks. One of the things that was mentioned was the supportive housing complex in Gibson's. Initially was to open December, then they were saying January. Now they're aiming for February 1st, 2021. So we're looking forward to that opening, and there are definitely people who need that. The Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing has been split into two, as you know, after the election. So there's now a Ministry of Municipal Affairs. Former Mayor Josie Osborne from the town of Tofino, town of Tofino, I guess, is that minister. She's the one who won that election. So we had a call with her and the Deputy Provincial Health Officer last week. And she indicated that that is something that is going to continue. She's going to continue to have these meetings. So what she does, they split up the province into 5 categories, and they set up about an hour-and-a-half teleconference, and they do a bit of an update, 10-minute update each or so. And then every municipality has an opportunity to, and put forward what their issues or concerns are. So I put forward a few things, one being that we want more details on the, safe restart funds, like what can we use them for, etc. I wasn't the only one, but that was one. There were a few other things too that had come up. Councillor Lamb gave me something that he wanted brought to their attention. I requested that if grants have been awarded, that they please get on with making the announcements, because we can't move things forward until they've actually made those announcements. So they're going to take that away. And I followed up with these as well with email to them. So we will find out, information back. One final one. Dave Lasser has been the registered forester, I guess, at Community Forest for a number of years. And I think it's about 8 years. He's retiring at the end of December here. So the Community Forest acknowledged him with a wood carving, one of the fellows from the coast here, who shows his product every year at the Wood Expo, and Dave really liked what he did. Very expensive little replica things that he does. I guess they're getting a worldwide attention, so they got one of those for Dave. I think there'll be a picture in the paper or something, and a little bit of a write-up just acknowledging his work and thanking him for his years of service. So then I wanted to acknowledge this is our last full public council meeting before the holidays. So I just wrote a couple of comments. I want to say thank you to staff, to council, and the community for support this year. It's been a tough year. I think we're all ready for a break. I know I am. So over the holidays, kick back, relax, recharge, because 2021 shaping up to be a very busy, productive year. I had a conversation with the CAO and with the CFO. We're looking at all of the projects that are potentially on the list and all of the grants we've applied for. And there's lots out there that could be moving forward next year. So take the time to recharge. I think everybody deserves it, but be ready to come back and get down to work. So that's it. Have a great holiday season. I'm going to turn over to Councillor Toth for his SCRD report.
Thank you. My SCRD report is attached. Our very last SCRD meeting until the new year is infrastructure services tomorrow morning. It's a nearly, what is it? Nearly 400-page agenda.
Yeah.
346 pages. Still got it open because I need to finish reading it. There's over 300 pages in there on dam safety. And yeah, it's an exciting read for anybody who's interested in dams and safety and concrete. If you're not interested, it won't be so exciting to read. I don't really have too much to add on top of that. Happy to take any questions. One thing I did fail to mention is actually the Seashell Chamber has a thing tomorrow that they're doing at 12 o'clock, which is the business of policing on the Sunshine Coast. And they've got Staff Sergeant Poppy Hallam coming to speak to and with them tomorrow for that. So hopefully we get out of ISC early enough to make it, but yeah, happy to take any questions.
Okay, I'll just make a comment on that chamber. If you're thinking you might want to go, please pre-register because then they send you the link for it. All right, any questions for Councillor Toth? All right, seeing no questions, let's move on to correspondence. We have 3 items of correspondence on our agenda. I'd look for a motion to receive the correspondence. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And all 3 are marked for action. The first one is in response to the method that was taken this year with regards to the minister meetings. I know in past what they're saying, and I mean, we've experienced it, is that when we have the 1 week of UBCM, they have also scheduled the minister meetings during that week. And so when there are resolution sessions or even some of the sessions that we want to go to, information sessions, we a lot of times have to duck out of those and go and attend minister meetings. And what they're indicating in the letter is they much prefer the way it happened this year, where they were separate. So that UBCM, the actual resolutions and the, you know, the program stuff is separate from the meetings, so you can actually get the full benefit of that. So they're requesting that, you know, we respond to UBCM. So what would council like to do? Councillor McLean?
Yeah, I'm not in support of this. UBCM is a week off. It's half of my vacation time for a year. So if I were to spend my entire vacation time doing this, it's important, but so is time for me. So it worked this year because it's fully digital. If it's fully digital again next year, that's fine. But in terms of a long-term change, I don't support this.
Yeah, I'm right there with Councillor McLean. I unfortunately don't get vacation time, but certainly I don't want to see a 1 week meeting dragged into 2 weeks length. I read this letter a few times and I couldn't see the actual action item within this letter. I thought it was just an information thing. So I mean, unless somebody wanted to put forward a motion to say me too, I don't think we have to do anything with it.
Okay. The other piece that I noticed this year, because we had the meetings virtually, the provincial government actually used the phone. So I don't find that, I mean, even something like this format, I feel would be better because we can see who's there. We can see who's taking part in their side. We can see who's taking part in our side. They actually see that. Whereas doing it on the phone, I didn't think it had the same kind of impact. So I would prefer it be, I don't mind the virtual meetings, but not on the telephone. I think we need some other kind of technology to have these meetings with them. Okay, so nothing going further. So if anybody individually wants to just put something forward or not, then that's fine. Next one is with regards to Sunshine Coast Lions Housing Society. This is a letter that they sent us in response to the decision we made. Any questions or comments? on this one? Councillor Toth.
I've actually got a couple of questions for our staff just to confirm some previous decisions made. And I did warn them that these questions were coming, so hopefully they can answer them. If I remember correctly, the Lions received a reduction or a waiver on any frontage upgrades on Ocean. And I just wanted to know if that was the case or not.
My understanding was that council declined to ask for excess offsite servicing, additional sidewalks on the other side of Ocean Avenue, widening of the existing sidewalks. So their frontage is largely in place. Sidewalk goes the length of that block. They will, of course, be doing landscaping and so forth, but the decision was to not ask for additional offsite servicing.
Which is something that we do ask for out of a lot of developers. I know we're trying to be a little more reasonable, but we do still ask for it a lot. The first time we talked about the DCCs on this project, it was convoluted for me in the understanding of it. So I just wanted to confirm, we're looking at charging them DCCs on only 35 units of what they're looking to build, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so based on 35 units, 20 years, DCCs end up being $37 a month on the market rental portion of the dwellings. And then another my last question is, did the previous phases of their project contain any market rental, or were they 100% subsidized?
I did reach out to Debbie Ferguson from the Lions Housing Society to confirm that. And they did have at that time, the term or the range, the household income range at that time, and it was called lower middle to modest income, which was $40,000 to $60,000 per year. And so the market income on this phase is $74,150 per year. So it being a decade later, it's more or less meant to reflect the same value. And the development cost charges were waived at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? All right, is there any action we'd like to take on this letter? All right. Looks like there's no appetite to engage in reconsidering. Last item.
Yeah, maybe I'll just
okay.
jump in
Okay.
real quick. Sorry.
Go ahead. That's okay.
That was kind of slow there. Yeah, I'm personally not in support of the decision that council made to charge DCCs, but that is the decision that has been made. I understand the logic. These units are at a higher, they're not subsidized. They're part of the development, part of the fee structure that needs to be calculated to build this unit. And these are the costs that the District of Sechelt has related to growth. So I personally think we should be doing more, but we made this decision and I will support that decision that this council made.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands up. Last item is a letter from the Sunshine Coast Electric Vehicle Association. I've got both Councillor McLean and Councillor Toth. Who wants to go
Councillor
first?
McLean can go first this time.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So to Director of Planning, I'm just wondering, what do we do currently for electric vehicle charging?
We don't presently have anything in the zoning bylaw that requires this. It is something we have considered for the future bylaw, absolutely. It's a question of where and how much that might occur, but it would be a new idea for us to enter into this as part of a regulatory aspect.
Go ahead.
And just the follow-up to that, I believe there's been some projects that have included some provision for it, and that would have been done site-specific.
Perhaps through development permit or discussion through rezoning rather than obligatory requirements of zoning bylaw 25.
Okay, so we've done a little bit, but nothing on a major scale, nothing consistently. The argument that the Electric Vehicle Association makes, put in the conduit now, I look at, for example, a townhouse complex, huge parking lot. If we go to electric vehicles, they're going to need to do some pretty significant changes to get that electric vehicle ready. Put in the conduit now makes it a whole lot easier to do it later. My question is, why aren't we doing 100% vehicle charging now? Get the full power right to every spot. Get it in new builds, because this is the way we're heading. And otherwise, we're just looking at a whole lot of retrofits.
So perhaps we could refer this letter to the planning department for review and potential inclusion in the zoning bylaw, or the building bylaw would be, right? Is that where it would be?
Well, we'll have to research that. The zoning bylaw, what immediately comes to mind for me in zoning bylaw would be multifamily commercial developments and so forth, right? It does make sense when constructing a single family dwelling to insert the conduits. I get that. That does make sense. We'd be looking and consulting with BC Hydro about opportunities as well. There are non-regulatory aspects and offerings of chargers and so forth. We also need to do a little bit of research. The Building Act does not allow us to regulate beyond the building code. If we were to say offer this as an incentive of a rezoning application or a requirement, that's a little bit different than say amending our building bylaw, but we'll look into that a little bit further as well.
Okay. Councillor Toth, and then back to Councillor McLean.
Sorry, just a follow-up question for the director, because I heard something there that sort of piqued my curiosity. I thought we could regulate tighter or more restrictive requirements than the BC Building Code. We just couldn't loosen the requirements of the BC Building Code.
I'll have to confirm that. I'll have to look into that. That's a tough one. I'm pretty sure that basically the province establishes the building code and we monitor and inspect, but aren't to change the aspects of it through the Building Act. But nonetheless, can look into that and confirm.
Check into that, because I think I know where Councillor Toth is going with this, and I think the last building code prior to the step code, the BC had changed the building code, and it was actually in response to some of the communities who had put in more restrictive requirements. And at that point, I think they said, no, you can't do that anymore. You cannot do anything more restrictive than what the province has put in place. So, find clarification on that, but I think that was what the case was at that point. So that's the change, only happened like within the last 5 years. Councillor McLean.
Yeah, so just on the planning side of that, Plugin BC has a really good resource page that lists all of these regulatory changes that different municipalities have made. And the vast majority have done it through the zoning bylaw. And I just want to cite a couple examples from there. City of Richmond, 100% of residential parking spaces require level 2 charging. Whereas City of Kamloops, they do a more phased response. By 2023, all newly constructed residential parking is EV ready. So maybe setting out some aspirational goals towards that end may be a productive approach. But for now, I think we can refer this to staff and have that more fulsome conversation later.
Okay. Do you want to make that recommendation?
Yeah, I'll move that we refer this letter and the subject of EV charging and solar conduit to staff.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Seconded. Okay. Councillor Toth to the recommendation.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I had a couple more points I wanted to mention before Councillor McLean brought up the moving it forward. But I support the idea of making things sort of ready for. I don't know that I support the idea of mandatory chargers, because as an electrician, I know what the loading looks like, I know what the demand calculations look like, and I know what that equipment costs. And I think to require it for a family or for a dwelling that may not quite be ready to make that switch to electric vehicles. You know, to Councillor Lamb's comment earlier, it's like that adds a lot more to the cost of housing. Whereas if you're looking at solar and a car charger as a combined retrofit or what have you, you can put solar panels on your roof that cover off your car charger. I have a family friend who I believe was one of the co-authors of this letter who did exactly that. They installed their car charger and their solar panels at the same time. And so because of that, it didn't have an impact on the electrical load and the service that they required from BC Hydro. So I'm supportive of sending this to staff to give consideration to, but I don't think making charging equipment mandatory is going to have the effect we're looking for, except to drive up housing cost.
Okay, any other further comments or questions on the recommendation on the floor? All those in favor? Thank you. Any other comments on this before we go forward? Did you cover off your comments, Councillor Toth, in that kind of roundabout way?
I tried to shoehorn my comments in there, so I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, good. All right, any emergency items to come forward? Nothing? All right.
No, Your Worship.
I'd look for a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded, all in favor?